Hello everybody and welcome back to ChäoS. It's been about a month since the last time I actually recorded a part of this. I'm going to start my timer. There will be another interruption in about a week or two as of when this video goes up. And that should only be about a week, but it might be two. Obviously I'll attempt to record enough videos to avoid any issues with videos being missed. But either way, it had been 3 days since Ban Yasuji had last entered the Shibuya Police Department's main conference room. The meeting to discuss the investigation of the Maru Yamashao staking homicide had already begun, and everyone glared at Ban when he came in late. Smiling amicably, Ban lowered himself into a seat at one of the tables lined up at the front. The room didn't have the kind of atmosphere where he could say his reason for being late was because he'd gotten the runs and had been cooped up in the bathroom. In the wee hours of the morning after it occurred, the Maru Yamashao staking homicide case had been assigned to the Shibuya Police Department, which now housed the headquarters of the investigation. The investigation division, already busy with the Cornelius Tower Group suicide case and the Shibuya Station college student and fetus homicide, were forced to recruit even useless third-rate assistant inspectors like Ban from the central Tokyo station. Moreover, since everything had taken place in the area under the Shibuya Police Department's jurisdiction, they were caught in the bizarre situation of having 3 special investigative headquarters located in the same station. It was thanks to this that the 3 investigation teams were forced to take turns using the station's big conference room. There were rumors that since the media had been cultivating the New Gen label and the police were short-handed, the 3 teams might be combined into the New Gen investigation headquarters. All the detectives thought this was a moronic idea, no better than a gag. Inspector Matsunaga, Ban's boss, and the person responsible for their investigative team all looked at Ban sharply as he addressed him. Paying him little heed, however, Ban flipped a fan at his face and took a breath.
Ban 警部補、聞いているのか？
呼ばれてるっすよ。バンさんの報告待ちなんすから。ちょっと。
When the newbie sitting next to Ban, who also happened to be his partner Suwa, hissed into his ear, Ban finally realized he was being called on.
すんません。報告は諏訪から。
自分っすか？
俺がいなくても報告しとけって言っといたろうが。早くしろ。
After Ban elbowed him a little, Suwa let out a short sigh and stood up energetically.
犯行現場近くの監視カメラの解析がようやく出ました。犯行時間に不審な人物が映ってました。
The meeting room stirred. The slackening air underwent an instantaneous transformation. The Shibuya station detectives, seated along tables at the back of the room that faced Ban and the others from the central station, began urgently taking notes so as not to miss a moment of Suwa's report. They were desperate. After all, with 2 savage murders having occurred in a single month, though the group's suicide had not yet been conclusively labeled a homicide, it was natural for them to become prepared to stake everything on seizing the perpetrator, even their reputations.
プロジェクターに映像を出します。
As Ben had previously instructed him, Suwa aimed the projector at the screen. A black and white film of one of I was doing so good with it before. Maru Yamashao's narrow, filthy alleyways was reflected there. It was hard to see anything given it was night and there were few streetlights.
犯行現場から約50メートル離れたところにあるコインパーキングの監視カメラです。
The coin-operated lot was small, as it had room for only 2 cars. It had been unjustifiably constructed in the tiny space between buildings. One could not see the crime scene in the field of the camera's picture. One could not even see the road that crossed in front of it. What the film showed was a certain street about a block away from the crime scene. On a side note, there was no sound to accompany it. The time of recording was neatly displayed in the lower right-hand side of the screen. It currently read 21:34.
犯行現場近隣の住民の証言により 21時過ぎから21時半頃まで釘を打ちつける音がしていたというのはご承知の通りだと思いますが、この映像は21時34分、つまりまさに犯行時間直後ということになります。
Well, 2134 is not immediately after the crime took place. It's shortly after, but not immediately.
不審人物が映っているのは21時34分53秒からおよそ6秒間です。駐車場の前の道を奥から手前へと走り抜けていきます。
As soon as Suo finished his explanation, a human figure emerged into the picture. Acting considerably flustered, it dashed from the depths of the screen to the foreground. Due to the poor resolution and brief shot like that wasn't enough to let anyone determine... Due to the poor resolution, a brief shot like that wasn't enough to let anyone determine whether the figure was male or female. However, Ben had already asked the forensics division to analyze this for him.
科捜研で解析した結果、映っている人物は男。年齢は10代後半から20代とのことっす。です。
Okay, don't know what the hell that stutter was there.
人相の判別までは無理でした。服装がかなり特徴的ですが、これは小島にある私立水明学園の男子制服と分かりました。それと右手に注目してもらいたいんですが、
The picture zoomed in on the suspicious figure's right hand. He appeared to be gripping something.
スローで再生するとわかるが、走りながら腕を振っている際、この握りしめている何かが駐車場の照明に反射して光を放ってるんだな、これが。
Ben took over for Suo right when things were getting good.
形状からして犯行に使われた十字架型の杭である可能性がある。
The detectives grew noisy again. To think that the perpetrator of the staking homicide might be a high schooler, it was a minor shock to them. It meant that the mass media's inflammatory catchphrase, the new generation madness, could very well have become reality.
最も犯人に近い人物がこの少年だということか。
そういうことになりますね。
Ben rubbed his unshaven chin. It was a habit of his. Whenever he sensed that he'd driven a wrongdoer another step into a corner, it pleased him to make sure of that ever-prickly sensation.
以上です。
Suo let out a deep breath and settled back down.
ひどいっすよ先輩。美味しいところ持ってって。
Disregarding Sua's complaints, Ben once again looked at the projector so as to burn the male high school student's figure into his eyes.
ようやく尻尾を出したんだ。そいつを掴んで離さねえようにしないとな。
As expected, the image file Shogun had sent me was in the folder where my cache was kept, a JPEG file by the name of 168491. Hesitation was born of the fact that I really didn't want to see it still lingering inside me. Or, that I really didn't want to see it still lingered inside me. It was such a gory and sickening image. Once I looked at it, I wouldn't be able to keep my mind from calling up associated memories of the scene of the staking murder I'd seen in real life. No, but I had to do it, to prove you were wrong, to guarantee my own safety, and to assert my innocence. Sarah was watching over me, so I'd have time. I have to try to endure the Guro factor for a little longer. Mustering my courage, I double-clicked to open the file. No matter what, it was still foul. But it wasn't such a big deal compared to the staking I had seen in person. And if I thought of it as a composite, I could just barely bring myself to tolerate it. When he first sent it to me, I'd only taken a fast look before closing it. I hadn't scrutinized it. I hadn't scrutinized its every nook and cranny. This time, fighting back the nausea, I examined the image closely. I didn't know much about how to tell whether or not an image had been shopped, but I figured I'd be okay if I paid attention to things like the direction of the shadows and if anything in the scenery felt off. One possibility was that it had been created by combining previously taken background photographs with a CG version of the pinned-up corpse. And the day after Shogun sent it to me, the murderer had put the killing method this photo illustrated into action. Due to the pixelation and the dim lighting of the nailed-up body shown in the photograph, I was only able to make out the staking and couldn't see much of the body itself. Now, actually, one thing I do want to bring up now that we've seen the police's video of this from a camera that was presumably on like the side of a store or something. In this case, I guess to overwatch the little paid parking area there. This photo is clearly taken from off the ground. So that would require that this camera was up on a wall. And yet, the police don't have that, so we can only, and of course it's also color, so we can only assume this isn't a CCTV camera. So the question becomes, how could this picture be taken realistically? From here, at a fairly awkward angle, and presumably can only be taken with a person having been there in that spot to take the picture, realistically. Obviously, you gotta remember, for those of you that have played this, watched the anime, anything like that, this is sort of a, to some extent, almost supernatural or paranormal. Is probably, supernatural is more accurate, I imagine, but either way, you get the point I'm trying to make. Sort of story, so obviously there's more to it than this, but realistically this picture would not be able to be taken. The light hit the area only around the pinned up corpse, making it seem as though the staked parts were saying, "Come on, look at me, please." It felt like the person who made the picture had intentionally arranged it that way. For starters, it was kind of overdoing it to solely spotlight the body. Also, it's sort of unnatural that the light's only right there. For one, this is in an alleyway, so there presumably isn't much lighting here in the first place, and yet, for whatever reason, there is miraculously lighting around the one spot that is designed to draw your attention, and the light just sort of helps draw your attention to that spot. Well, I hadn't closely studied the actual crime scene, so I wasn't really in a position to say anything. In the photo, that demon girl wasn't standing in front of the nailed-in body. But if I stretched my eyes wide and stared unblinkingly at the image, I began to see something shaped like a person in the darkness along the left edge. I had been in danger of overlooking it. The photo's graininess and the fact that they were standing in the shadows made them completely dissolve into the background, and you wouldn't stand much of a chance of noticing with just a glance. This had to be shopped, but maybe the person who made the photo had accidentally entered the frame when they were taking pictures, and then forgot to erase it when they were manipulating the rest of the photo. Whatever the case, the figure appeared to have a Suime uniform, which meant it was the demon girl, for she too had worn the Suime uniform. But when I strained my eyes even harder and looked at the figure in the photo again, it seemed to have short hair. The demon girl had long hair. This would knock you out of the running as well. Alrighty, let's try using some of the image editing software to make it easier to see. Opening up the editing program, I dragged and dropped the picture, and after a single, conclusive breath, I selected Adjust Lighting, or Adjust Levels from the menu, and brighten the image's dark parts. Now, it should be noted here, this is not adjusting the levels of an image. This is more along the lines of inversing the colors. So yeah, this is not adjusting levels at all. This is telling Photoshop or GIMP or whatever photo editing software you prefer to use to invert the colors. I feel like that's something that you would expect the artists for this would have caught. And it's possible that that's just the way it was decided to translate this for whatever reason, was to say adjust levels, even though that's in no way accurate to what is actually being shown. What's this? And you got the game background music finally coming in. The one photographed there, no matter how you looked at it, the one photographed there... Why was I there? It was outlandish because I hadn't gone to that place once since September 29th. This had been shopped in, too, no question about it. I couldn't find the slightest evidence to prove it, but it was obviously a composite. If not, it'd be crazy. Besides, Shogun had sent me the picture on the 28th, and the staking murder had occurred on the 29th. If this picture was a picture of the same place where the crime happened on the 29th, my being there would make it a photo of the future.
あなたには予知能力がありますか?
うるさい、そんなはずはないんだ!
And again, there's the sort of supernatural starting to come in. Kicking away one of the empty plastic bottles at my feet, I closed the image editing program. I opened the JPEG file properties to check the data had been created, and I've been shocked. It had been created on the 28th, but that had already stopped mattering to me. A single sentence, written in the comments field of the property window so as not to stand out, it was that which my eyes became nailed to. Dun dun. I hit the keyboard, pushed it to the edge of my desk, and cradled my head.
セーラ助けて.
I held back welling tears. This whole week had been full of one incomprehensible thing after the other. Why was I the only one who had to suffer like this? Wait a second. If he had gotten his hands on my picture and combined it with this Guro image, Shogun had, at the least, either surreptitiously photographed me beforehand, or acquired my picture somewhere or other. Going by how he'd abruptly entered the chat room and waited for Grimm to leave before he started talking, he must have been targeting me from the start. Maybe he had access to my personal information? If so, it wouldn't be odd if Shogun and the Demon Girl came to my base to attack me at any time. They'd abduct me. The back of my neck prickled. It was that gaze again. I was being watched by someone. Don't look at me. Like hell, I'll turn around. It'll take more than that to make me turn around game. Terror covered my whole body in goose flesh. Most people just say goosebumps, but whatever. And I longed to go up to the door and make sure it was bolted, but I would lose if I turned around, so I went on stubbornly staring at my monitor. Well, if you only lose if you turn around, the obvious solution, assuming you're in a rolly chair, is sort of push and kick yourself back towards the door with your hands behind your back, check and see if the door is bolted shut or not. And thus, you will have never turned around, and thus cannot lose. Unable to settle down, I opened a word processing software and began typing in my thoughts.
きっとそうに決まってる.
See, so Demon Girl equals murderers, comma precog, Shogun equals Demon Girl's underling, Yua equals Shogun's underling. I mean, I suppose that's a way that could work also. Unless inters are different. I don't think inters look like that in Microsoft Word, and presumably most word processing software. At least here in the US. I mean, I suppose it's technically possible it's different in Japan. I just don't think that's particularly likely. It'd be a little weird to use a different symbol. But I don't think this is what's used in the US for showing that an enter was done. Also, it shouldn't show 2. This enter takes you down to this line. And thus, either of these enters would then take you to the next line. The only reason you would show 2 is if it was 1 here, and then this bullet point was down 1. Troubling a little as I looked at the word demon, I began to wonder if maybe the girl at the scene of the murder really had been some kind of devil. Yeah, she couldn't possibly be human. If so, maybe she could see the future. It'd be a walk in the park for her to transfer a vision of the future into a picture via spirit photography. Nor was there anything wondrous about the fact that she'd carried out that dreadful staking all by herself. Spirit photography. Yeah, because that's a thing. She'd used her subordinate Shogun to send me data since she knew I would coincidentally see her at the crime scene. I didn't know the reason why, perhaps to intimidate me, a threat to make me think that I'd end up the same way if I told anyone. Or rather, an advance warning of her next murder. A death sentence. I'll kill you next. If that were really the case...
勝てるわけがない。僕は奴らにいつ殺されてもおかしくないんだ。
So we're only at about 21 minutes, but we just hit one of those. And the next one probably won't be for like at least another 20-30 minutes. So, we'll have this be a bit of a shorter episode this time. Yeah, that's fine. The reality is I also realize that a lot of the times with my videos, a lot of people don't tend to get that far in, so 20 minutes is perfectly acceptable. But yeah, so I will see you all next time. A quick reminder that if you enjoy the content on the channel, I do have a Patreon and Discord. You can find links to those down below in the description. Discord is my go-to place for posting about channel happenings, so I do highly recommend that you join that if you want to stay up to date on channel happenings, which I'm sure many of you would obviously want to do, presumably. Also, for the Patreon, that is best if you enjoy the content on the channel and you want to help basically fund the channel. This channel is not monetized at all, so any funding comes solely from Patreon, affiliate links. I've recently tried to get into Twitch streaming, and I've sort of managed to keep to it somewhat shockingly with a fairly regular schedule. But obviously the Twitch channel is not a partner or anything either, so again, it is not monetized in any way. And the channel actually has not been monetized for quite a while, ever since YouTube changed the rules for requiring setting some minimum requirements for monetization. The channel has not been monetized, so if you enjoy the content on the channel, you want to, again, like I said, enable me to be able to continue producing this content, Patreon is the best way to help support the channel. For as little as $1 a month, you'll get early access to all of my videos, and it helps the channel out immensely, especially over time, especially if people also maintain their subscription. Also, looking at my YouTube analytics, I see something like 81-ish% of my watch time comes from people that are not subscribed. So go ahead and subscribe so you can stay up to date. You know when new videos are posted. You can also hit the bell. That in theory should help ensure that you get notified. I've never done it with any channel that I watch, but I suppose it technically should help. But yeah, so I will see you all next time. But until then, a goodbye and farewell.